I'm Matt Wallstatter. My wife Megan and I own Pure Green, which includes Pure Green Gardens, our grow, and one retail location at the moment. I have been a cannabis grower since the early 90s, and so come at it from the cannabis side of things. But you know, I also have owned some other businesses. I have a law degree, and we're also very politically active. We're founding members of the Oregon Cannabis PAC, and helped found the Oregon Cannabis Association as well. So we're really involved in that.
My name is John Spencer. My claim to fame is I started the world's, if you will, first governmentally owned and operated marijuana store. I was the city administrator for the town of North Bonneville, quit to go into consulting, and a month later they called me up and said, "We've got a funny idea for you." And since then I've been consulting in cannabis as well as government and medical fields. It's kind of funny for me. Just 4 years ago I was one of the guys trying to figure out how to put everybody in here in jail. And now I'm one of on the other side. So it's been a switch for me. It's been great. I think what we're going to do is we're going to start with Matt, and then I'll do some talking, and then we'll wrap up with Lori, and we'll save. I think we want to save the Q&A for the end.
Sure. Yes, and how about, can we get a quick raise of hands for anybody who is brand new to this business and looking to get into retail? So about half. And is anyone here in retail currently? Okay, great. And some people just here kind of checking it out? Okay, great, thank you. I'm sorry, I said, go ahead.
All right, so what I want to do is just kind of give a little overview of running a dispensary. And so when my wife Megan and I decided to start Pure Green, we started to think about, okay, what all needs to happen? And we identified some really, I guess I'd call them significant areas of the operation. And we sort of created departments around those. Now, I use the term department very loosely. Most of these departments were just me, or just Megan. And over time, some of them have grown. But I call them departments, and the reason is that, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces here, a lot going on, but you really need to identify the important areas, and then you need to create systems and you need to create accountability. So areas that we identified right off the bat were compliance, security, which is really kind of a subset of compliance, but it's got enough of its own considerations to be worth mentioning. Operations, which, you know, just handles product coming in, the product moving out, and everything that happens in between. Inventory, which again, a subset of operations, but an incredibly important one. Accounting and bookkeeping, HR, and marketing. Now, once we identified these, you know, there's two things that I really want to emphasize to anybody, whether you already have a dispensary or you're already getting started. If I were to talk about each one of these things, which I don't quite have time, I think, to address every single one, there'd be two themes that you would hear me, and that you will hear me talking about over and over again. One is professionalism, and the other is accountability. Now, professionalism is kind of a squishy subject. There's an interesting parallel to obscenity, believe it or not. And in the 60s, there was a Supreme Court case about obscenity, and Justice Potter Stewart famously said, "I can't really define obscenity, but I know it when I see it." And that's kind of how professionalism is. There's a lot of things that it could mean, but you know when someone's acting professional and when someone isn't. One thing I want to specifically address, though, is with regard to professionalism, is treating your cannabis business just like any other business. And Lori, coming from a background outside the cannabis space, a lot of times there's things that have been done in cannabis for years that are very different than conventional business. That comes from the black market nature of things and that history. But one of the things that we decided very early on is that we're not starting a cannabis business, we're starting a business, and it happens to be in cannabis. And so there are playbooks out there for retail marketing, retail HR, and things like that. Don't think, oh, I'm in weed, this doesn't apply to me. It's just the opposite. So that's professionalism. The other thing is accountability. It's really, really important with each of these departments to have one person who's ultimately responsible. Now, as an owner of a business or a manager of a business, you're kind of responsible for everything that goes on beneath you, and that's fine. But there needs to be somebody who is in charge of making sure marketing things happen, and who's accountable if they don't. Security, compliance is especially important in that regard. So as you're kind of setting these up and organizing them, that's something that I would harp on, and I would recommend that you focus on. So with that in mind, I'm going to go through a few of these and just kind of give you some tips and pointers in getting this set up and organized. So regarding compliance, you got to keep in mind that you have state and local compliance to deal with. You have federal compliance too, but it's of a slightly different nature. So the focus is really state and local level. This is really, really important. So again, this is a place where you need to have one person who is in charge of this, who is absolutely accountable for the fact that if a rule changes, your company will make the proper changes to fit with that. And so that's really important. And the other thing that I'll suggest with regard to compliance is to be proactive. To really get out there and engage with your legislators, with your rule makers, with the people that are going to be in charge of regulating you. So, whether it's sitting on committees or lobbying at the legislature or, just calling and introducing yourself to your compliance inspector. That really goes a long way. And, so when we have questions at Peregrine, we call our compliance inspector. We just did an anniversary party and we wanted to serve alcohol. So because we've been proactive and because we have good relationships with both the OHA and the OLCC, we were able to get the right people on the phone, get the right permissions, and ultimately have our party and have some drinks. So being proactive and being engaged in compliance is really important. Security is, it's a subset of compliance. And so, whoever's in charge of compliance is often in charge of security. The one thing I'll suggest with this is work with professionals. And when I say professionals, I don't just mean security professionals, I mean cannabis security professionals. Because security is about keeping yourself safe, and any security expert can help you with that. But it's also about complying with all the laws and rules that we have. And so having someone who specializes in the cannabis industry, who understands not just, oh, it's a good idea to have a camera here, and maybe I'd put one here, but no, we're required by law to have them here, here, and here. It will save you a lot of work in setting up a compliance system. So with operations, I think that my suggestion is go to as many stores as possible. See what's out there and what's going on, and get a sense of how you want your store to run. And then standard operating procedures and an operations manual. You want anything that's done by an employee, you want written down step by step in a way that a fifth grader could do it, assuming it's a job a fifth grader can do. But you really want clear standard operating procedures. This is going to be helpful when you train your employees. This is going to be helpful when you have to bring somebody new in. It's helpful anytime there's an issue around liability. If you can point to a written procedure and say, no, we've trained everyone to do it the correct way, and here it is in writing to show you that. That can also be really helpful. Inventory, part of operations, crucially important. My advice with inventory is make sure that whoever is in charge of inventory really knows cannabis. We talk about at our shop weed geeks, and whoever's in charge of your inventory needs to be a weed geek. They need to be able to look at a pound and say, oh, this wasn't dried properly, or oh, this is dried, but it still needs a few days to cure, or no, this is not Obama Kush. I know what Obama Kush looks like. Also, whoever's running operations needs to be familiar with the marketplace so that they know what strains are popular, what concentrates sell, and things like that. So your inventory person needs to focus on it. Accounting and bookkeeping, again, this is a place where you need one person who's ultimately accountable for everything. That's going to be crucially important. Also, again, working with professionals here is trying to do your books by yourself is kind of a nightmare. And So you want to work with professionals. You want those professionals to know the cannabis industry. If you have an accountant who doesn't know the ins and outs of 280E, that accountant is not going to be particularly useful to you. So finding someone who really understands the industry is important. HR, just a couple of things. First of all, a written HR policy is really important. Same reason as a written operations policy. It enables you to lay everything out, have the steps, and if there's ever liability, and HR is a place where you will see liability, you can point to it and say, no, we followed this procedure that you signed off on. The other thing I'll say about HR is you have to be careful to make sure you hire for the present as opposed to the future. And what I mean by that is we've had a couple of situations where we hired someone to be a bud tender, but our thought was, yeah, she'd probably be an okay bud tender, but she's got the perfect skill set for a social media coordinator, and as soon as we're ready, we'll move her right in. Well, that's all great until that person gets on the floor and can't do the bud tender job. And so we've had this come up a couple of times where we saw a lot of potential in somebody for a job that we might have down the road, but then it turned out they couldn't do the job that we needed them to do today and tomorrow. So be mindful of that. And the last thing is marketing, and I'll just really briefly say that we decided to take a professional approach to marketing right out of the gate. There's a lot of people who think, oh, this is weed, it sells itself. And that used to be true. It used to sell itself. It used to sell itself for $4,000 a pound. And so the margins were so high that it didn't really matter. That's not the case anymore. And marketing, there are a ton of people out there with cannabis and cannabis products. A lot of them have really good cannabis. So what's going to set your Obama Kush apart from my Obama Kush, or your OG Kush apart from my OG Kush? Well, if they're grown in an equivalent way, what's going to set it apart is the brand. So think seriously about your brand and do that right out of the gate. So I think that's about all the time I have, and I'm going to pass it on. Are you going to?
We'll go this way,
All right.
and we'll come back to questions at the end.
I'm going to make the attempt to stand, if I can do that. So again, I'm John Spencer with Pulse Consulting. I want to talk to you about government relations, community relations, and then financing. I'm going to start with the government relations part and the community relations, because you guys are the face of the industry. It's the retail side where the people actually see the professionals. And it is so important to where this industry is heading that you guys get it right. It's a lot like marketing. You need to be out there regularly, every day, talking to the regulators, talking to your neighbors, talking to the OLCC. Matter of fact, if you've got a notepad and you haven't done this yet, I would like each one of you to write down, note to self, call the planning director at my local city or county tomorrow and set up a meeting. And it doesn't matter if you haven't even started filling out the registration or the licensing form yet. What matters is the government agency know that you are a responsible good member of the business community. It's a lot like what Matt was saying. It's about professionalism. What you're going to do is you're going to sit down with the planning director or the community development director, depending on the town. And first thing you want to do is make sure that they know that you're the good guy. You're going to hear what they have to say, hear what their concerns are about, hear what the rules are, and be able to respond to them and let them know that you're going to do it right. Once you've done that, then you can go and start asking your own questions. How do I get through this process as painlessly as possible and as quickly as possible? Second thing I want you to do, as soon as you figured out the neighborhood, I don't even care if you've got a lease yet. I just want you to know that as soon as you figured out the neighborhood that you're going to work in, that you're going to go talk to your neighbors. And I guarantee you some of those discussions are not going to be pleasant. And if you're concerned about that, hire me. Or anybody else. Bring somebody with you. You don't need to do this alone, but you do need to do it. You need to get out there and let them know again that you're a good guy, that you hear their concerns, and that you're going to work with them. There's a number of examples out there where a grow operation, for example, was broken into, and they've got video of that person who then went next door as well, and they were able to go to the neighbors and say, hey, we caught him. This is a really good thing to be able to share with your neighbors and let them know, again, that you're professional, that you're working with them, that you're there to be a good member of the community. As Matt was saying, the OLCC is your friend. Their job is to make sure that this industry rolls out as smoothly as possible. They want you to succeed. If you have any question, matter of fact, even if you don't have a question, call them up, let them know you're coming. Ask them what questions you do have. Same thing goes with your licensing inspector. Great story with the Cannabis Corner in North Bonneville. The weekend after we opened, one of our board members thought it would be a great idea to make up some cheesy flyers and post them in the park and let everybody know that we're open. Obviously, it wasn't the best move she had ever made. Intentions were great, but not the best move. First thing we did, of course, was to take all those flyers down. Second thing we did was to call the Washington State Liquor Control Board licensor or inspector and say, sorry, this is what happened, this is what we've done to fix it. What are your concerns? What can we do to be better? And her response was, thank you. She did not fine us. She did not read us the riot act. What she did was say, thank you so much for being professional, for taking care of us. I know we've got a great relationship, and just keep moving forward. Another great example that we did that I thought was excellent is we went and had a sit down with the county sheriff. He's one of those sheriffs that really wishes he could turn back history about 4 years and get rid of I-502.
502.
502, thank you. He did not like us being there, but he did appreciate that we sat down with him. We went through our security plan, we went through our operating plans, we explained to him how we were going to keep the product away from minors, and he turned to us and said, geez, could I have access to your video monitoring system? And the immediate response is, heck no, we're not going to let government in there. The secondary response, the response we gave him was absolutely. As soon as an incident happens, we will give you access to this monitoring system so you can look at it. Now, we didn't give it to him 24/7, but we're working with him. And that's what's important. Again, it's professionalism. Let me move on to financing. It's tragic. I really wish this were a 2-hour session, not a 10-minute or a 45-minute session. We were talking about that earlier. Many of you may very well be concerned about how the heck you're going to pay for this. It ain't cheap. I'll say that I raised about $283,000 for the North Bonneville shop. I really wish I had raised more like $325 or $350 grand. One of the mistakes I made is I put in contingency money, but it never occurred to me to factor in how much money we were going to need for the first 4 months of operating losses. Plan for that one, don't make my mistake. Who are you going to get the money from? First thing you're going to do is talk to your friends and family. Most likely they are not all millionaires and they're not going to just fund your thing. But what they will do is they will give you an honest feedback about what's good in your plan, what they like, what their fears are, what their concerns are. And if things go really well, you might get $500, $1,000, $5,000 out of them. And the great thing about that is that when you next go to the Daddy Warbucks, you're going to be able to say, I've got a great business plan, I've got people already investing, I've answered their concerns, and this means that you should invest too. Now, where are you going to find Daddy Warbucks? You're going to start with your bankers and your investment advisors. You're not going to go into the Bank of America and say, hey, do you know somebody rich who can give me money? What you're going to do is you're going to go to the Chamber of Commerce, sit down with the banker, and say, here's what I'm doing. Here's, I need to come up with $300,000, and here's what I've done so far. Do you have any suggestions for me? And just have those conversations. It's really not that hard. Once you've got a few, come to investor forums like what we've got going on tonight. The other thing you need to be thinking about with financing is equity versus loans versus outright gifts, which there won't be many of those. Advantage of equity, of course, is you don't have cash flow issues. They're not demanding, there go my notes, they're not demanding that you pay them a certain amount every month. They want a cut of the revenues, of the profits. Disadvantage is, well, they now own part of your business. Advantage of a loan is you don't have to worry about somebody on your board telling you what to do, but you do have to come up with probably a high interest rate and pay it on a monthly basis. So sit down and have a really cold, analytical approach to what mix of the two are you going to get, how are you going to do it, and again, what do you need? And don't be afraid to again, talk to people and dicker. And again, what I want to say is talk to people, ask for help. There are plenty of people like me out there who want to help you, and we're not necessarily going to be all that expensive either. I wanted to mention that if you do the work, talking to a professional is not going to cost that much, because all you're going to do is have a 15 half-hour, 1 hour discussion on, here's what I've done, what do you expect or suggest I do next. Would you please review my business plan and provide suggestions, that sort of thing. If you do the work, your expenses will be a lot less. With that, I think we'll move on to Lori.
Great. Wow, thank you both so much. You guys talked about just about a lot of the topics I had prepared as well, but that's okay. I want to dive a little bit deeper into a few things. Everything we've spoken about so far is really about risk mitigation, keeping your risk as low as possible. We're working in a particularly risky industry, and starting any business is highly risky. You've probably heard statistics about how many startup companies go under within a year or 2 years. And a lot of business owners fail for the same reasons regardless of the industry that we're entering. Now, are we at a phenomenal time in a phenomenal place to make a tremendous impact and make a lot of money? Absolutely, we really are. But as each year goes by and as competition gets tighter and tighter and rules get more and more stringent, it gets harder and harder. So as you're going into this business, mitigate risk. Look at all the risks in all the areas, and we've talked about several of them. We talk about compliance. Compliance is like this magical word. Like, what does that mean? Well, really, compliance is just, it's play by the rules. And if you're going to play by the rules, know what those rules are. It may be easy to look to your consultant or your lawyer to make sure that they're helping to ensure that you're playing by the rules. But I would recommend that if you're going into business, read each and every state, local, and even federal rule that applies to you and understand it. Take that time. If you haven't read through HB 3400, I suggest you do so. Get to know it really well. I've got a number of consulting clients, and I've always, and they're in a number of different areas. They're growers, dispensers, retail test, and it's really, it makes everybody's job easier when everybody knows what the rules are up front. And also they can spend less on consulting and legal fees if they understand those rules. So that's kind of my first tip. Make sure you know the rules. I would reiterate the engaged professionals. So if those rules can be overwhelming, and a half hour, 1 hour, 2 hour consultation with a good cannabis lawyer can really save you a lot of time, and they can really steer you in the right direction. I would also say get a good tax person, CPA, that can help you set up your business to help mitigate the tax implications of IRS 280E. If your company is not properly set up for 280E, you can end up spending a lot more in taxes than you could otherwise. You could save a lot of money by properly looking towards that type of structure. Also, ensure that you really think about the controls you're going to put into place. The seed to sale tracking, we talked about inventory tracking. Make sure you're documenting everything, we talked about that. Assume that you're going to get audited at every turn. So what that means is there's going to be an inspector or an auditor, perhaps even an IRS auditor, that could walk in your door at any moment and say, show me your security video, show me your last 6 months of transaction data, show me your inventory. And if you're organized and ready and well prepared for that, it makes that process easy. If you're not prepared for that, even if you've done everything to the best of your ability, it could create a lot of headaches for you in the future. So it requires exceptional organization. And I think even if you've kind of been in this business, or if you've been in other businesses, it can sometimes be easy to fall into day-to-day operations, and things can get a little disorganized, and inventories in people's heads, or you know that you've had certain agreements with, you know, the neighbor down the street, and you know you have, but if it's not documented, you can get away with that in some businesses. In this business, it's harder to get away with those types of things. So be really diligent about that. Want to reiterate the financing and cash management. Like with any startup business, things are going to cost about twice as much as you think, and it's going to take about twice as long as you think. So if you think it's going to take 3 to 6 months to put up your store and $250,000, you know, plan for close to a year and $500,000, because that's been my experience over and over and over again. Because there are just unexpected expenses that come up at every turn. Employees can come and go, and retooling employees can be quite a challenge. So coming into hiring, really vet out the people that you're going to hire. You might meet somebody and they might come across as slick and wonderful and awesome, but in that 1 or 2 hour interview, you may not really have the full picture of someone's capabilities. So take your time hiring and hire the right people. So with that, I kind of want to talk about the licensing process. How many people here are or have already applied for their retail, Oregon retail licenses? Just one. How many people would like to get into the retail business? Okay, so there's a number of people here that would like to apply. So let me just tell you a few points about what the application process involves in Oregon. Is anybody looking to apply in other states or has applied outside of Oregon? A few. What state? Washington, okay. Let me speak to Oregon, and I think you can speak a little bit more to Washington. So Oregon, we are so fortunate in Oregon that the OLCC has been really kind to the cannabis business community, and the application process here is probably one of the least stringent that I've seen. While it's comprehensive, they're not being really as difficult as it has been in other states. That said, it's still a complicated process. They are requiring a security plan, a transportation plan, an employee qualifications and training plan, a plan to limit access to minors onto the premises, as well as a plan to ensure minors don't acquire product. In addition, they want to know about your facility, your premises. They want to understand how much energy you're consuming. They want to understand how much water you project to consume. They also want to make sure you have the appropriate water permits. So all of this documentation together, it can be, you know, a binder full of documentation that can be very detailed. This documentation would be is a very useful good start to your standard operating procedures, which we had talked about earlier. And the OLCC wants to make sure that you're providing all of this information. What I think about these plans is don't consider them shelfware. Don't put them together for the purpose of getting a license and say, okay, well that's our plan, and then go on and work on them. These are living documents, and the OLCC has been very responsive to say, well, if you're going to change your plans, we anticipate that. So when we come around, when it's time to come around to inspect, you may have an updated version, and from what all indications are, they're fine with that. Just make sure you continue to update it. It's not like once you submit it, you're throwing it over the wall and hoping that it passes. But that said, I mean, these documents are really important to your day-to-day operating. Refer to them, make them easy to read, make them useful for developing your training materials, and just like Matt said, it could really help from a liability standpoint too. If somebody screws up in your, whether it's yourself or somebody else that works for you, and it's written in that SOP, you know, one is supposed to lock the door at the end of each day. If somebody doesn't lock the door, you can trace it back to the person who did it, and if that person was trained to lock the door, then you can assign that person accountable. If you don't have an SOP that says you must lock the door at the end of the day and something happens, you know, well then who's accountable? You know, is it the last person who left the building? You know, you have to really define those things. And I guess bottom line is just, I like to be really, I mean, I'm actually an optimist, but in this, about the industry, about the businesses, I think retail owners are going to do great, but as you're preparing and planning, be pessimistic. Anticipate that things are going to go wrong, because they probably will. So if you anticipate the worst and things come up, then you can handle it. You're like, oh yeah, I figured something like that I figured my inventory system would go down, or I figured I might, hopefully not, but maybe get broken into, or your inventory kind of gets out of kilter, or an inspector shows up at the wrong time. Just be prepared for those things. So with that, I think we can open it to Q&A.
So, banks are federally insured by the FDIC, and marijuana is illegal in the federal government. So there's a big challenge about where do I put all this cash. You're going to have a lot of cash. So up in Washington, what we've done is we've partnered with a credit union called Obi Credit Union. And the way they read the rules, they're just more than happy to take our cash, and they take it every day. But this does lean towards some kind of weird things. So when you have a company that you're making, let's say you're selling tires, you typically have the word tires somewhere in the name of your company. So people know, hey, that guy sells tires. When you go to the bank, I'm Steve's Tire Company. Like, oh, great. When I start shopping around for stuff and people to help me, and I'm Steve's Pothead Esquire, like, oh, Pothead, yeah. So you might consider an LLC with a name that has nothing to do with marijuana, and then do DBA your marijuana store.
Absolutely.
We found that to be extremely helpful.
Yeah, I can speak to the banking issue a little bit. I have now had accounts closed at 7 or 8 different banks, and we're working on our 9th. It's really challenging, but we've found a couple of things. First of all, if you can find a bank that will work with you knowing what you're doing, that's really the best thing to do. Having a holding company with a different name is really good. If you're going to go in and try and get banking without necessarily disclosing the nature of your business, there's some things you can do to help with that. Start by overdressing. It's a small thing, but when people see a suit, they're less suspicious. And frankly, the banks, especially in Oregon, are looking for cannabis. They know that we're out there. They know that we're trying to slip in through the cracks. And that's where the DBA can get you in trouble. Or not get you in trouble, but we've had one bank that went to the Secretary of State website, looked at our corporate name, found the DBA associated with it, Googled Pure Green, and we were done before we even made a second deposit. So that's going to happen too. Beyond that, there are some things that you got to be careful of. A lot of people think I got to keep my deposits under $10,000, so they make a bunch of $9,000 deposits. We've had accounts closed for that. They call it structuring deposits, and it's if you keep depositing $9,500 every couple of days, they know you're trying to avoid that $10,000. That'll raise some suspicion. So that's something else you want to be mindful of. But mainly, they're doing more due diligence now, at least here in Oregon. And so you're kind of on the clock. And the best thing you can do, if you have banking and they don't know what you're doing, have another account somewhere else too. So that when that one gets shut down, you have a place to go. You do less volume of cash that way. So there are things that you can do to kind of hold on to your bank account for a little bit longer. Yes?
Are the banking issues, is that primarily with the 4 major banks like Wells Fargo, US Bank? Is that the smaller banks?
There is one credit union in the state of Oregon that is openly serving cannabis accounts. And they are not taking everybody, and they are small and limited. Beyond that, there is not a bank or a credit union in the state that has a corporate policy allowing cannabis. You'll often find a little bit better luck with the smaller banks. They have smaller compliance departments, maybe a little bit less due diligence. The other thing is a lot of banking, a lot of the folks in the industry that bank right now in Oregon, it's about relationships. So if you've got other businesses and you've got a banker that you work with, you might be able to say, hey, listen, I'm also doing this, can you help me out? Now, that's dangerous. The answer might be no, not only can we not help you out, but we're closing all your other accounts. But if you have the right relationship and you're feeling lucky, it's a way that you can go about doing it. Again, smaller banks are going to be your best bet there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I also recommend very, very strongly, keep any of your personal accounts. Like if you've been banking with Wells for a while, do not even think about starting. Don't even don't go there. Don't go to Wells. Keep that account.
What about ancillary companies? Do they have an issue with that?
Yeah,
Like
so.
not just retail dispensaries, but they have a problem with
So Cannabis, which is one of the main sponsors of this this conference here, they have had their account shut down. They're a security company. Not only that, but they have Cannabis and OmniGuard, and OmniGuard is all their non-cannabis. They've had OmniGuard accounts shut down as a result of that. One of a friend of mine who's an attorney who's businesses his practices in cannabis had his account shut down. And it was he told them he was a law firm. Oh, that's great. And then they went to his website and saw this, cannabis this and cannabis that. They shut him down. They said, we're not sure, but we want to be safe. So, you have an easier time with ancillary companies. There are definitely banks who are comfortable working with ancillary companies.
structure properly.
Yeah, if they're structured properly and if it's the right bank. And that's, it's going to be a little bit of trial and error there as well.
I can give a quick example too. We have a test lab in Bend, and our test lab has had its bank shut down. We, the parent company, we're based in Nevada, and we fortunately have completely avoided any issues so far, but we did get a very small credit union in Nevada. We call ourselves a consulting firm. So far, no problems, but we're definitely keeping our fingers crossed to make sure that and keeping that separation, having a parent company, having child companies is also helpful.
What's the word with, I'm hearing about Oregon State Bank for the cannabis industry? Is that?
There has been some discussion of doing something like that. Here's the problem, and with banks, there's a couple things that are crucial to have with banks. First of all, you need to have insurance. And in Oregon, that has to come through either the FDIC if you're a bank or the NCUA if you're a credit union. And neither of those organizations so far have been willing to offer insurance to a bank that's a cannabis bank. The other thing you need is a Federal Reserve master account. And what that does, that's what your routing number on your check is tied to that. That's what allows banks to move money electronically. The Federal Reserve has said, we're not giving out master accounts to any bank that's cannabis focused. So you can do a state chartered bank and you can have it operate only in the state, but if that bank wants to move money electronically, which is a requirement in order to be able to just to do checking accounts, you've got to have that Federal Reserve master account. So that's really hard. And the Federal Reserve, there was just Fourth Corner in Colorado is trying to get open as a credit union, and they got denied. They went to federal court. They lost. I think we're going to see more luck with banks that already have insurance and master accounts kind of slowly making their way into the cannabis industry. It's going to be a really difficult thing for any institution, state or otherwise, to come in and say, we're doing this for cannabis, give us insurance and a master account. So that's really the end.
And the government eased regulations, I thought, last year for that to happen?
Not exactly. They gave some guidance. The Treasury Department and the Justice Department, it's called the Cole Memo, and it offered guidance for banks that want to work with the cannabis industry. They said, you can do this if you follow these rules. They also said you're completely liable for anything any company that you're working with does. So for most banks, they've called it a yellow light, if anything, but certainly not a green light. And the banks have said we need better guidance. And these banks, they're billion-dollar companies. They've got shareholders all over the place. The cannabis industry is big, but it's not big enough for Bank of America to deal with litigation and penalties and all of that. So we're not there yet.
When you do your SOP, is there a format, someplace you can go to get a format of how it all works, or do you just sit down and just each function that you have in your store, you just write out how you're going to do that? Is there something, a guideline?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the OLCC did not provide guidelines for SOPs, nor have any other state that I'm aware of provide specific guidelines for SOPs. Our company's guideline is based on what we've done in other industries, which is we provide procedures that ensure two things. One is we look at the entire business process of the business. We look at every transaction, every step of the business, and we document how each transaction works. So we understand what roles people play in the organization, what they do, and outline in great detail what they do, and also kind of cross-reference that to each and every regulation. So the SOPs should ensure that you are meeting or exceeding every regulatory requirement, all at the same time leaving yourself flexibility and room for changes, potential future changes in regs, and also potential future changes in your business structure. So it's kind of a balance. It's, you know, with the language that we use in our SOPs are things like, instead of saying, you know, the general manager must ensure that the retail location is locked at 11 p.m. each night, say, you know, the general manager or his or her assignee ensures that the facility is locked at closing time, or something like that. So it leaves yourself some room. But to answer your question, no, there's no specific format.
I want to jump in on that one. I think at one point or another we've all talked about a business plan, which is the all-encompassing plan, if you will. But I don't think we really focused on it enough. It's among the first things you're going to do, and what the business plan is going to be is, you know, the SOPs are subsets of it. It's also going to be your financial projections. It's going to be a description of who owns it, what the structure is, and how it's going to be operated on a global level. And the reason it's so important is two reasons. Actually, I'll say three. First, side note, what's going to dictate how successful you are? First is location, second is the business plan. Because in writing those plans out, you're forced to think it through, and you're forced to get ready. And being ready means that you're going to, you know, roll it out more smoothly. Second thing is anybody who wants to fund you or who is interested in you is going to want to see it. And they're going to want to see, again, that it's professional, that it's thought out, that it makes sense. And with that, I've forgotten the third thing. But what I want to say is definitely it is among the all-important things. Get started on it right away and call for help.
And, you know, one other thing, you know, when you talk about coming up with SOPs, so my wife is my business partner, and so what we did in the weeks when we were getting ready to open the shop is we just started to think about everything that happens in the shop. And what we literally did was we had her follow me around for a day and kind of write down everything I did. So, like, we had, you know, we were training our staff and we were doing mock transactions, and she was writing down every step that I would take to do this transaction, and that became the SOP for completing the sale. Same thing with inventory intake. We sort of did this, you know, hi, I'm the grower bringing you a pound, and we sort of went through all the steps. Well, okay, so what do we do next? All right, so it's here, it's in turkey bags. Are we leaving it in turkey bags? No, we want to put it in Tupperware. So weigh it, you're going to enter it into BioTrack. So we literally had someone standing over the person who was doing these things and writing down every single step. And then, you know, once we had that, we could go through and tweak it. And now we say, okay, well, you know, we don't want to do it this way. Maybe we want to do it this way instead. Well, now every time we make a change like that, we're back into the operations manual and changing and say, oh, now we do this first and this second, and we used to do it the other way around. But literally just, you know, thinking through everything that you're going to do over the course of a day and then writing it down. And this goes back to what you were saying about a living document too. Our operations manual is getting updated, you know, at least once a month at this point. And earlier on it was weekly, sometimes daily, because we thought, oh yeah, I guess we don't want to do it this way, or this really doesn't work, or what if we try this? And so it's something that you keep updating, but to get to that starting point, that's a really good way to do it.
So I noticed that the OLCC requires a floor plan
Yeah.
for your business. Does that mean you have to hold a lease on a building while you wait for, so you will have to pay rent?
As I understand it, you need to show proof of ownership, and that could be a lease, that could be a, I have had clients that have submitted proof of ownership as a kind of a, what do you call it, like, and the name's escaping me, like a promissory, you know, like an intent to move into a certain place. I haven't definitively heard one way or the other if that's the criteria for rejection. I don't think it is. I mean, I think as long as they know where your location is, then that location is properly zoned. Land use compatibility statement, though, is required. They're gonna look for that. I think you need to be an owner. Yeah, so I'm kind of,
Yeah, I could speak to that a little
Yeah,
bit
thank you.
because I've been in the thick of this licensing process. Every license in Oregon, whether it's producer, processor, retailer, or wholesaler, is attached to a specific piece of real estate. So you need that piece of real estate in order to be able to even apply. And when you apply, you have to prove that you have legal access to run your business in that property. So that is either, it's either a lease, or you either have to show that you're the owner or that you have an executed lease. I don't think that you can get through the land use compatibility piece with just a letter of intent. You have to have a legal right to occupy that space in order to do it. And so yeah, unfortunately, that means paying for a lease until you get licensed. Now, one thing you can do, although the clock is ticking on this option, is, for example, in retail in Oregon, you could open as a medical shop. If you had a retail space that was ready to go, a month from now, you could get your OHA license and run it as a medical shop until you get your OLCC license, and then you could be operating as opposed to just paying bills. But you're going to need to have that real estate.
On that OHA, that's what we're doing. We're doing the medical dispensary first, but we submitted all our paperwork October 20th, and at that time, they were looking at applications back in July. As of 2 days ago, they're into September right now, so they're really backlogged on going through that process. So it's just a part of having to submit it and wait.
Well, I think a lot of people, it's not an original idea to say, I'll operate as medical until I get my rec. So I think there's a lot of people that once rec became a reality, that said, all right, we got to get operating in medical as quickly as possible. And so I'm sure that's contributing to that thought.
and I think we're running short on time. Maybe we could take a couple more questions. Any final closing comments?
Just say thank you all for coming, and we'll be available when we're done if you have individual questions as well.
Thank you all very much.